First versus second in the Premier League. Arsenal versus Man City. These are the games, guys, aren't they? These are the games where it feels like we might have a classic on our hands. Poor Kweku's just realised that he's actually going to be in Dortmund watching the Dortmund-Chelsea game. Which is, I mean, look, just enjoy it, okay?
Yeah,
Some of us don't get to enjoy European football. But the last 4 games that Man City have played, Arsenal, they have beaten them. It's got more and more difficult as it's gone on for them. And this is the one we've been waiting for, isn't it? Let's dive straight into this preview, because I think probably for the first time all season, really, we've got some, concerns or at least debate over the Arsenal lineup. Trossard came on, got himself a goal. That's what they kind of got him for. But there's been a bit of talk about Martinelli not starting in this game. Is there any way you make any changes from the Arsenal team that we've seen do so well this year?
No, it's an interesting one as well, because barring injuries, Arsenal have been very, very consistent with their starting lineup. It's like a classic Premier League team where you can name their starting 11 without having to think about it twice. But now the results have kind of gone awry. There's been some question marks. I don't think Arsenal need to panic too much and make wholesale changes. You stick to what you know, you stick to what you do. Arteta's a very principled manager. I don't think he's going to be listening to the outside noise. He's going to stick to what he knows. Maybe Trossard comes in and starts because he is an adequate replacement for Martinelli. There's no bones about it. He's a very, very good player. But I won't expect to see Zinchenko come out or Ben White come out. I'm not expecting to see Arsenal change because of these 2 results against Brentford and Everton. I think Arsenal will stick to what they do, and maybe you see 1 or 2 changes.
With Trossard, they bought him for a reason, and he's been, obviously he's been played for 2 different teams, but he's been one of the better players in the Premier League this year. Is there an actual argument for him to come in, just so that maybe you're not saying Martinelli's a bad player, but you're saying, okay, let's switch it round, let's let Martinelli come on with that pace and try and hurt them in the second half of the game?
I think,
especially a game like this where Man City will have the ball a lot of the time, maybe Arsenal want to be able to do the same.
yes and no, but I think if there's ever a game you probably start Martinelli, it's this one. Because in transition, you need pace and you need someone who's willing to run in behind. I think he's quite unfortunate. The games that Arsenal have struggled in, Everton, Brentford most recently, their sides are going to sit in. So he's got to take his right back on to make something happen. And it's not that he can't take them on, but he's one of these wingers that I think if you're a central midfielder and you've got Partey on the ball and you look up and you've got Martinelli sprinting ahead of you, you're hitting that diag. And I think Arsenal have to be a little bit tempted to go a little bit more direct against City, because we saw in the Villa game, actually, Luca Dean was sort of clipping this ball down that left channel over and over again. Ollie Watkins was getting after it. Leon Bailey was getting after it, because City have a problem down that right side, big time. Because Kyle Walker, not to say he's lost his athleticism, but he's not quite at the sort of speed he's been at before. I think this season there's been a number of occasions where he's been beaten for pace, and that is what he relies on. So I think in that sense, I feel like you've got to start Martinelli. The problem you have is, like you said, is then you bring on Trossard, and it's the old-fashioned case of, well, you just brought on someone who can't actually run in behind. So now you've got another player whose feet you've got to pass it to over and over again. Whereas Martinelli maybe as a sub would be better for impact. But Arteta, as Kweku said, he's a principled guy. He wants to win this game. He's not going there with the idea of if we start Trossard, Martinelli to come on, we might be able to counter them. He's going, we will play our football and we will beat them our way.
Do you know what? I totally agree. And I think it's one of those where, look, when it's not going your way, which is, nonsense really when we're talking about Arsenal and the season that they've had. But going into this game, you've got 2 options. You either change it or you double down. It's definitely double down, isn't it? Because that's what's actually made them faster, smarter, better than every team in this division this year, is that the 11 and you know that that Odegaard's going to be in that little half space, Partey's going to be sat there, Ben White's going to be inverted a little bit, Saka's going to be wide, we know all of this, but the passing networks and the cohesion is so ingrained that they do it too quickly. Yeah. And when they do it too quickly, they have answers. And so I totally agree in terms of Arsenal's lineup. You have to stick with what's worked. And actually, in that moment of concern of are we having a blip? Are we going to not have confidence? Arteta can go to that team and go, it's not about confidence. Do what you've been told. Don't even think. You know what your passing options are. You know what to do. Just feel it. And this is one of the games where when it's going to be as sort of high octane as you would imagine it would be, despite I know it's not Liverpool, Man City, it's a different kind of game. But you're going to have two teams who are going to want the ball, and they're going to want to move the ball quickly. So you better be able to not think about it, just do it. That's been the problem with Chelsea and Tottenham and Liverpool this season.
Also, on that note as well, when Arsenal played City last season and lost the game 2-1, Gabriel got sent off on 59 minutes. Arsenal went toe-to-toe with City when they weren't quite ready, and they were actually better than City on the day, and they could have won that game. So I think Arteta will wind that tape back and go, this was a year ago when City were on it, and we weren't a shadow of this side we are now. This was the 11 we played. This is how we played. We do that again this year while we're in form and they're not, and they've got Haaland. They're trying to figure that bit out. We will be fine. We've got to go with that.
Point into that game is such a great point, because you remember Rodri's celebration when he scored the last minute, when he took a shot off, ran to the fans, and City knew that game was important. But Arsenal, I think, learned more from that game than any other game last season, because yo, we're not there yet, but we took him, and Arsenal played really well, and Arsenal deserved to win, and obviously Gabriel gets a super sending off, and he's somebody to watch in big games. Gabriel does sometimes lose his head, and he has been caught short, whether it's making a mistake or getting sent off, but he's kind of carrying that centre-back partnership at the moment, but he's definitely somebody to watch in this game, because if things start to go wrong for Arsenal, he's somebody who's got like a short fuse. But Arsenal, in what they do, they need to shift it quickly. Like you say, what they do is they move the ball fast, and that they move it faster than any other team in the league. Moving it from left to right and unsettling City's midfield and unsettling City's wide players as well is what is their key to success. Bukayo Saka isolating whatever left back plays for City is
if they play a left back.
If they play a left back.
I mean, let's get onto that, because Man City, there's obviously far more question marks here with how they're going to set up. And talk about that game last year. This isn't that team. You know, it's a lot of the same personnel, but there's a lot less pace. It's a lot more narrow. You don't have a sort of proper out and out left back to go there. Bernardo Silva was he was sort of had a free role defensively in the game against Aston Villa, but sort of drifted off to that left hand side when he needed to. I think that's actually just a huge compliment to the intelligence of a guy who you would think might struggle a little bit physically in some way, but is tenacious and has outrageous stamina and is so wonderful on the ball as well. Do you think, because we talk about Martinelli Trossard thing, I think another reason why you have to play Martinelli is almost as not a decoy, but to kind of keep them honest. If you think of the Man United game, they played so high and wide that either you come and meet us, and you leave spaces in behind in the half spaces, or you don't, and we'll get the ball, and then we get to run at you one-on-one. And both those players had a lot of shots and got into the box a lot of times against Man United. And Man City, it's going to be Nathan Ake or it's going to be Bernardo Silva in that area. You've got Grealish and Mahrez a little bit further up who will kind of work back. But I think that area on that right-hand side, Saka's going to be so crucial in this game. Do you go with Bernardo Silva and a kind of assert your will on the game in terms of dominating it, or do you play it safe and play Nathan Ake there?
Me personally, I think Ake as a 1v1 defender will be completely fine. Saka will get past him because he is one of the world's best wingers. But if you play Bernardo Silva, I think you run the risk of him ripping him to shreds, essentially. I was looking at the average positions against Villa, and the distance between Laporte and Diaz is quite big. And that's because Diaz plays as a right-sided centre-back, and Laporte, because he's so well-versed in possession, gets wide quite frequently. So they'll find themselves in that situation quite often. Then if you go and park Ake next to him, I think you can double up on Saka. Kind of like what United tried and didn't work, really. But
kind of what they did with Salah at times.
Yeah, I think man for man, if you've got a fullback, with no disrespect to Ake, who is tackle and kick, you can deal with players like Saka. It's the more complex fullbacks that struggle. Zinchenko against Mahrez will be interesting because Zinchenko doesn't just want to tackle and get the ball out. He wants to tackle and start playing and get in a position. That area will be a problem for Arsenal, and that's been probably their weakest area defensively, their strongest area in possession. Very similar to City when they had Cancelo. Their best area in possession, their worst area defensively. So that area, I think, is massive for Arsenal and City.
It does seem like out wide is where the game's going to be won, because for City, the two most informed players right now are Jack Grealish and Riyad Mahrez. Riyad Mahrez is probably, in the form of his City life, he's playing really, really well, pound for pound, best touch in the Premier League. And Jack Grealish, who's really kind of starting to find his feet in the City team. I think the main problem for Man City though is that Jack Grealish is so integral to what they do at the moment, and I love the way he plays football in terms of winning fouls, just keeping possession, and just making sure that City retain possession, but not in the way that City used to in terms of passing the ball. Is just dribbling a lot and making sure that he gets a foul at the end of it. But that's not City at their optimum. City at their optimum are moving it quickly and passing the ball back. Right now they're a little bit more static and a little bit more segmented in the way they get up the pitch, and I think that's a problem for City, because I think when they're operating at an absolute optimum next season, that's not the way they're going to play. So it'll be interesting to see how Arsenal deal with Jack Grealish, because at the moment he's at the fulcrum and does everything that's good about Man City.
I think that's why Bernardo Silva has to play that little bit higher up as well, because he goes and helps a lot of the time to sort of be an overlapping runner or an underlapping runner to give Grealish an option, because ultimately Mahrez and Grealish a lot of times actually sort of come inside and come into cul-de-sacs a little bit and don't stretch the play like the Man City teams that we sort of known over the last few years. Let's get our predictions then. Because ultimately, we're kind of saying here that Pep's going to sacrifice his principles a little bit and play it a little bit safe in terms of having Nathan Ake there, that's the one thing I wonder. Or I guess you've got Rico Lewis, of course, who can go in that area and may well do. But if he does make that tweak, that doesn't sound like Pep to me. So I think there's a twist in this. I really do when it comes to the lineups. Prediction time. I'll go first. I think Arsenal. I've been waiting for Man City to be Man City like all season long, and look, they were a lot more direct against Aston Villa. It was impressive. I think Arsenal are a better team, and I think it might turn out to be
so quietly.
It might turn out to be a draw. But I think that's a great point away from home. Yeah. I think Arsenal have got more than enough to win this game in terms of the matchup and in transition and just that odd shape and odd decision making that's coming. And there has been a slight tweak on that, as I say. They were looking to get Haaland in a lot quicker, which is what they need to do, I think, and they could hurt them in that way. I just think Arsenal, I think they'll be fine, and I think they get a draw.
First mention of Erling Haaland, we've been talking for about 10 minutes, and can you imagine a guy who scored over 20 Premier League goals this season? He's been at the centre of all football conversations, and the biggest game of the season against Arsenal, and it's the first time we mentioned Erling Haaland, which is indicative of what's wrong with City at the moment. We all know that Erling Haaland hasn't quite fitted in as smoothly, and the transition's not been as smooth as they would have liked, but he's going to be important for them.
Nubaid, what do you think?
I think if Bernardo Silva starts at left back, Arsenal are going to win. I don't see how that works. Ødegaard in that right half space as well. The overload in that area is going to be horrific for Bernardo Silva to deal with. So if Bernardo Silva starts, Arsenal win 2-1. If Bernardo Silva doesn't start, you start Ake, I think 1-1. I don't see City winning though. I'm convinced Arsenal will not lose this game.
Thanks so much for watching ESPN on YouTube. And for more sports highlights and analysis, be sure to download the ESPN app. And for premium content and live streaming, subscribe to ESPN Plus.